This is the BS4 podcast, and I'm your host, Bria Villa. Welcome back, y'all, to the BS4 podcast. I am your host, Bria Villa, and I am so excited to have you, as always. Thank you for tuning in. This episode means a lot to me because I feel like this is a journey that I've been on for some time, and I haven't always been open about talking about grief. And that's the topic for today, is grieving and what grief looks like. And it's outside of just the way that we think about grief, so like death. But there's so much more to grief that I want to talk through, and I'm excited to share it with y'all. So today the B is for bravery. It's for being brave and continuing to show up even though things are hard, even when you are grieving, and still going out and facing the world, knowing how tough things can be sometimes, especially when you're in a really tough state of mind. And so I think about grief in a few different ways. I think, again, when people hear grieving, they think, oh, you lost someone. And while, yes, that is the case for sure, and can be and has been in my situation, you also can grieve places, you can grieve things, you can grieve relationships with people that currently are around still. And going through the grieving process, I feel as though, obviously there's so many different stages of grief. You'll experience it in different ways, and it's really hard to control sometimes, because grief, I like to say, is a thief. Like, it'll come up and sneak up on you when you least expect it, and then take away what you feel like is strength at times. But in reality, it shows you, one, what you can get through and your strength and how brave you can be. But on the other side of grief is growth. And so I'm really excited to talk about grief today. I don't know anybody who's ever excited to talk about grief, because it's a hard topic, but it's important to me. And so I'm really excited to share. I feel like the last few years, so actually, let me rewind. Recently, I'm someone who journals. I journal every day, actually. I do a gratitude journal daily, but I also take intentional time to like write out journal entries, like a diary. Which sounds funny to say because I'm a grown woman and I still write about how my day went or how I'm experiencing things. And I've been more into journaling the last few years of my life. I didn't always do it, but I got put onto it through therapy, and also someone else that I know recommended journaling and just getting all your thoughts out on paper. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to start doing it and see what happens, because I'm someone who, I really internalize my thoughts. I spend a lot of time here, but then I don't release it anywhere. I don't talk to people about it because I feel like it can be burdensome. I'm also just a really private person. I keep my cards close to my chest. So I'm not going to be the first person that overshares what's going on in my life. But I felt like I just kept all my thoughts up here. And then I feel like your body keeps a score. So the things that I would go through, the things that I'd be dealing with, I feel like it would take a toll on my body and stay in my subconscious, because I never took the time to release it and to get it out there and to talk through the stages of grief that I'm feeling. And so when I'd be angry, when I'd be sad, when I'd be lost, when I'd be in denial, all of those things would just live inside me and not go anywhere. And so I decided to really start to journal, because I felt like it was so important to me to start to get some of that stuff out and not let it live within inside me. And so I started journaling years ago. I started to get really big on it back in 2021. And recently, now in 2024, I found a journal with journal entries from 2021. And when I tell y'all, reading through this journal was so emotional for me, but so liberating because I really journaled out exactly how I was feeling in some of those moments. And to see myself at that point in my life to now this point in my life, I wouldn't even have imagined that here now. I wouldn't even have imagined my life as it currently stands 3 years ago when I was writing those journal entries. But being able to look back on them and see exactly how I was feeling in that moment and know that I've overcome that. Like those feelings that I was having were so real, and being able to like read those journal entries, it put me back in that spot of like, oh my gosh, I was really like torn up about this, or I was super sad at this point in my life. But now, fast forward, I'm so much stronger because of it. And it was so liberating because I was like, okay, I have come such a long way. I have overcome that stuff. The things that I was sad about before, I'm no longer sad about and probably wouldn't be sad about again. And it just showed me how much I've progressed and how much I've grown. And I'm so thankful for that. But it also showed me how much I've actually grieved. Like I've been grieving for the last 2 to 3 years, so many different things. I think I'm no, I think, not I think, I know. I grieved losses in relationships, some being like breakups and people that I'm no longer seeing and dating, some being friendships that I thought that I was going to have in my life for a very, very long time that are no longer in my life, and grieving those people even though they're still around, grieving them, grieving the memories that I had with them, grieving the moments that we shared. I also just spent the last few years grieving an old version of myself. Like, I am not the same person that I was. And I feel like in the last few years specifically, I've been going through a transformative state, going from like 24, 25 years old to now 27, about to be 28. I have changed so much. The things that I was interested in before, I don't interest me now. The things that I believe before, I don't necessarily believe now. And so I watched myself change, and I've learned how different I've become. And in that comes grief. Like I buried an old version of myself a few years ago, and I've been grieving her ever since. And it's funny, someone in the room today actually told me a quote before of, love is to attend 1,000 funerals for the same person, of just like grieving old versions of themselves. And loving myself also means I've attended multiple different funerals of old versions of me. And the last few years, it's actually been like the hardest to really go through and totally change who I am, but change for the better. So I don't regret any of it. I'm 100% where I'm supposed to be. I'm in the best state of mind. I'm in the best physical shape. I'm in the best spiritual shape than I've probably ever been ever. But getting here was a journey, and it took me grieving old versions of myself. It took a lot of unlearning old habits, unlearning old tendencies that felt like a part of me that no longer are. And I felt like I was married to this identity that I created for myself. And in the last few years, I realized that you can change who you are in any given moment. You can wake up tomorrow and say, I don't like who I was yesterday, and pivot. A lot of that has come through hard work. It's come through therapy. But it's also come through just a lot of self-awareness and grief. Like giving myself the space and time to grieve, and grieve adequately, and feel all the emotions. I A part of me grieving was journaling. A part of me grieving was isolation. I feel like the last few years specifically, I've become a lot more introverted. I've become a lot more isolated. I don't speak on as much as I used to. I'm not as vocal as I used to be, not because I feel like I'm dimming my light, but because I've realized the importance of my voice and utilizing it in the times that I feel right about it instead of using it just to use it. I have changed even my interest in partners and the way that I look at men. I've changed a lot about me. I started reading more and I used to hate reading. I started listening to podcasts. I was never like a podcast type of person. So it's funny that I have one now. And so I've grown tremendously, but I also miss old parts of me. I miss sometimes that fiery side of me that I feel like is just quieter now. I don't wish that I was that way though. You can miss something and still not be it, or you can miss something or someone and still not call them. Like you don't have to act on things that you miss and you can still miss them, and that's a part of grief. Um and so for me, there's certain things that I miss about myself, like oh, I miss like the naivety of who I used to be because life was easier then. um but I don't wish that I was still in that space of naivety. And so for me, grief can be heavy, but it's completely necessary. And you have to trust yourself in the process of grief and listening to what you need and when you need it. And so I wrote down that grief enacts fear. When you are grieving, you can be in a fearful state of mind. You can question whether or not you should continue going because grief is painful. Um, and if you're living in a state of grief or you're grieving things right now, you may be fearful of what's to come, what's on the other side of grief, what growth is going to happen. And so, without even realizing it. And so, grief can enact fear, and then fear will take away your opportunity to grow. If you're constantly living in the space of I'm missing this, and so I just want to get back to who I was when, so that way I don't miss it, you're limiting your opportunity to grow. And so you don't want to limit your growth out of fear. And when we grieve and we go through really, really hard things, it makes us naturally more fearful because we've gone through hard things. So for me personally, outside of just grieving old versions of myself, old friendships, old relationships, old lifestyles, that was really hard for me. I lived a totally different lifestyle a few years ago than I live currently, and I miss it sometimes. And I'm grieving that. I'm grieving what was my normal and what currently is my normal. And sometimes it like angers me, sometimes it frustrates me, sometimes it makes me really sad, sometimes it makes me isolated, and sometimes it makes me fearful. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know what the future holds for me because I know how much I've changed, and I'm like, how much more am I going to change, you know? And but if we let that fear get in the way, oh, the point I was going to make too is also grieving death, loss. So I lost my brother when I was one of my brothers when I was 17. And I feel like that forced me to grow up really, really quickly and take on more responsibility as an older sister and as a person at such a young age than I had anticipated, or that, you know, most people should have to navigate. But I did. And I feel like my grieving process has been a really long time. I'm still grieving that. And it's been 10 years. That brought a lot of fear out of me. I used to be so paranoid about the people I love not making it home safe. I used to always get like frustrated with people, or even like people I was dating, of like, let me know where you are and that you're safe. Not because I want to know every single move that you're making and micromanage you. It's like out of fear. And that's because of the grief that I was experiencing. And fast forward now, I still grieve that. I still wonder, what would life be like if he was here still? What would he be like? And that's a part of the grieving process. Every year on the anniversary of his passing, I feel a different emotion. Usually that's like my one day in the world, in life, out of 365 that I can just grieve, like break my walls down and just have a moment to myself, because I feel like usually I try and show up perfect all the time, and I try and make the most out of every day that I get because no days are promised. But that day in particular is when I truly just let myself grieve. Like I let myself feel the emotions that I know are going to come with that day and what it's going to evoke. And so with that and that process and that journey, it makes you fearful. It makes you fearful in life. But if you live in that fear constantly, you're not going to give yourself the opportunity to grow. You're not going to give yourself the chance to see what's on the other side of that grief. But the best way to get through grief and eliminate fear is just let yourself go through it. If you compartmentalize it, if you keep it tucked away, if you don't address it, if you don't seek the help you need, if you don't find ways to deal with it, it will follow you and it'll hold you back. Like it will literally hold you back from growing. It'll hold you back from being a better version of yourself because you're living in this state of, I miss this and I'm fearful of losing something like this again. I'm fearful of going through this again. I'm fearful of these emotions happening again. But if you live in that state of fear all the time, you're just going to stay stuck where you are. You're not going to be able to grow. And so I've learned over the years too that you have to have a level of self-awareness in your grief to know what is a coping mechanism and what is actually healing you. A lot of people, grieve and resort to coping mechanisms that they don't even necessarily realize are coping mechanisms, but they're hindering you and they're holding you back. Some people, very common, this happens often, is like people grieve something, they lose a friendship, they go through a breakup, they lose a family member, and they pour themselves either into work or they pour themselves into partying. So they'll start drinking, they'll start smoking, they'll start doing a lot more things. They won't ever want to be alone. That's a part of the grieving process for sure, but it is a coping mechanism. Some people will pour themselves into work and just like keep their head down. I'm that type of person. If I'm going through something, if I'm grieving, I just work harder. Because working harder and the challenges that come from working helps take my mind away from the grief that I'm going through. And those are coping mechanisms. It's just pushing the grief off to the side or like to the back of your mind, but eventually it'll push its way back to the front if you don't truly address it and heal. And so people get coping mechanisms and healing confused. Sometimes it's like, oh, if I'm busy enough, I'm good. I won't feel these emotions if I just keep myself busy, and in a year from now, I'll be fine. But that stuff will come back and catch up to you. And I've learned that in therapy. My body kept the toll of all the things that I did not let myself go through. And so I'm like 5, 6 years later after my brother's death, and I'm starting to feel emotions I had never felt because I just kept pushing them so far back into my mind and occupying myself with other things. And it wasn't until I really like got through therapy, which is a way to heal, right? It's an investment that I made in myself to ensure that I'm healing and not just coping. That's when I really started to like turn the corner on my grief and know how to manage it better, know how it shows up, and give myself more grace through all of it. And so to me, you have to give yourself time to actually go through it. If you keep pushing it off, if you keep letting it go, if you keep sweeping it under the rug, it's going to hold you back. It's going to come back to bite you. And then you're going to live in a state of fear and stress that's not going to let you grow. What you may call weakness, I call moments of vulnerability, because that is human nature. Like, we are not intended to show up perfect all the time. And if you're not giving yourself the opportunity to feel your emotions, then you're not giving yourself the true human experience that you should be getting. Life is full of ups and downs. There was a podcast I was listening to recently, and they referred to the life's ups and downs like in reference to a heartbeat, and how a heartbeat's spike will go downwards and then it'll go upwards and then downwards again and upwards again. And if you are not going through ups and downs in life, you flatline and you are no longer living. And so going through the low moments is what actually propels you to the high moments, to the things that are beautiful about life. And so trying to live your life so detached from everything because you're so fearful of experiencing true grief will stifle your opportunity to truly live, because you won't experience the true nature of humanity. And being sad, being angry, being scared are not negative things. They're only negative if you constantly live in those states of mind. And granted, of course, there's people with depression who can't control their level of sadness. And I feel for you tremendously, especially someone who is neurodivergent. But to experience those emotions is not a negative thing, it is a part of human nature. You're supposed to know what those emotions feel like in order to truly find gratitude in moments of laughter, kindness, happiness, love, joy, confidence, you name it. And a quote that I heard recently that really like changed my perspective on a lot of things, and the quote didn't have an author and I wish it did so I could give them credit and give them their roses, but the quote is, may your decisions reflect your hopes, not your fears. I'm going to say it again. May your decisions reflect your hopes, not your fears. If you're constantly making choices in life out of worry, out of fear of what could happen because of that decision, you are going to live a life that 50 years down the road you may regret, because you spend the entire time worried about the what if instead of excited about the what if. And so to me, especially learning about grief and how much it can impact you, that quote stuck with me because I was like, may the decisions that I make in life reflect what I hope my life would be instead of what I fear my life could become. And the more that you make decisions aligned with your hopes, the more your life will align to the future that you hope to see. And grief is going to be a part of that. Like, you may hope for a lovely life with no stress and no drama and stability and all those things, and you will get glimpses of that. If that's something you hope for, you will obtain that, but it is going to have ebbs and flows. Like, you won't be able to appreciate the good things that come from that without the downsides that you've experienced. But you have to let yourself feel those things. If you don't, then you're just kind of in this stagnant, flatline space. And that's not what life is about. And so, to me, some of the most powerful people I've ever met, and truly like something I've even given myself credit for, which I don't like to do. So I'm saying this in the most humble way possible, is how I've overcome grief, how I've overcome hardship and harnessed it and used it to propel me instead of hold me back. Grief at first put me deeper and deeper and deeper into a shell of myself. But now it's actually brought me further and further out of my shell and more into the person that I want to become. I also see people who do that, who have grieved, in my opinion, far worse things than I could even imagine. They have had life circumstances that are so much harder than I can even envision because I've never experienced those things, but they still have allowed themselves to go through it in a very healthy way, and then come out the other side of it better for it, different because of it, but grown. Be kind to yourself. If you are going through something, allow yourself to go through it. Feel it fully. Journal, therapy, get in nature, find things that will help you heal. Whether it be a conversation with a friend, like you could have one person that you truly trust in life and you express your emotions to them. Whatever it may be, find your ways of healing and not just coping. Instead of trying to figure out, how am I going to get through the day? It's like, how am I going to use this to get through life? Future state. But be kind to yourself in that journey. Healing takes time and it is not linear. You will not wake up tomorrow and be like, oh, I'm healed from something really traumatic that happened the day before. It doesn't work like that. And I'm someone who actually, my whole life, I've actually been really impatient. I thought I was a patient person. I was not. I was not patient at all. And it took me time grieving to figure out that I'm actually a lot less patient than what I thought. I thought that I was supposed to heal quicker. I thought that I was supposed to get the things that I wanted faster. I put such tight time constraints on things that I should be doing in life, ways that I should be feeling, how I should be showing up, things that I should have. But those time constraints are not realistic because things do just take time. Healing takes time. It does not happen overnight. And be kind to yourself in your healing process. Stop bashing yourself and getting mad at yourself because you're not healed yet. It's just the way that it goes. Like, you just have to give yourself time and give yourself grace and be kind to yourself. You can't hate yourself into healing. You can't punish yourself into healing. It doesn't work like that. You have to give yourself time. And then do things that you know will help you heal. Don't do the things that'll just help you cope. Drinking every night is not going to help you heal. Partying every day is not going to help you heal. It'll help you cope, but it will not help you heal. Healing is hard work. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time, but it's worth doing if you want to grow, if you want to evolve, if you don't want to make the same mistakes again, if you don't want to have the same losses again, or if you don't want to feel the same way that you felt in certain losses. When you learn to heal and you go through a circumstance that's really difficult, that's similar to maybe something you've gone through before, guess what? You're going to get through it better. My first, and I'm going to use this analogy, my first breakup ever took me years to heal from. Years. Like, not months, not days, not weeks, years. I was in a relationship and didn't get into another relationship for 7 years. It's a really long time. Like, healing takes time. But then my second breakup, the breakup I most recently just went through, was nowhere near as detrimental. Not because I didn't love that person, not because I didn't care about that person, but because I am healed. Like, I've grieved. I knew how to grieve. And now the grief is just different because I'm more healed, because I show up for myself in a different way, because I know how to take care of myself, because I felt these emotions before and I can get through them again in a healthier way because I've taken the time to do so. But if I just jump from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and didn't let myself heal, of course I'm going to continue to feel those same feelings over and over and over again because I didn't let myself heal from it. So really, you're doing yourself more of a disservice by not taking the time to grieve than you are, and like just resorting to coping mechanisms, than you are to do the hard work and actually heal. Because you'll just repeat the same cycles. The emotions will still feel the same and they will just stack on top of each other. And then next thing you know, you're in a rut, you're in a depression, you're in a bad space for far longer than you should be because you didn't take the time to heal. You didn't do it. And so, all that to say, grief is tough. Grief is heavy as hell. And it is so hard to go through it. It really is. Whether, like I said, it's a loss, whether it's old friendships, old relationships, whether it's old versions of yourself, whether it's your younger self, like grieving the innocence that you once had and no longer have. All of that is heavy. It's really hard. I am not sitting here and saying that it's easy because it's not. I just told you how long it took me to heal. But if you don't do the work and you're not kind to yourself when you're doing it, you're going to regret it. It's going to impact you so much worse in the long run. And so I hope the message that you get from today is give yourself the opportunity and the chance to heal. Take the time to do it, do the hard work to do it, find ways that you can. It doesn't have to be the traditional way. Obviously, I always talk about therapy. I am so big on therapy. Not everybody has to do that. It may not be for everyone, but resorting to your coping mechanisms probably isn't the way to do it either. So I recommend at least trying or seeking ways in order to help yourself heal. And just know that the best is yet to come. Things are hard. Life is hard. Shit. I mean, it gets harder every day. The older I get, it gets harder. Okay. But it also gets better. Like it gets harder, but it gets better. I'm the best version of myself right now, currently. And I can say that confidently. I couldn't even imagine the girl who was writing those journal entries in 2021 that I was just reading recently that made me emotional. She wouldn't have even imagined where I am today. The things that I've done, the things that I've accomplished in the last 3 years, I would have never even pictured for myself 3 years ago. But if anything, my imagination and where I could go 3 years ago was maybe half of what I've actually accomplished to date. And so the best is yet to come. Things are hard. It will be hard. But things don't necessarily get better. You just get better. And so the best is yet to come for you. Give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself. Honor your journey. Grow through it. When you're going through it, grow through it. Make sure that you're healing, not resorting to coping mechanisms. And you will love yourself so much more because of it. So today, the B is for bravery. It's being brave. It's being brave enough to heal. It's being brave enough to keep going. It's being brave enough to grieve. Because grieving and going through grief is brave. So I hope that you got something from this today. If there's anything that you're grieving right now, I'm sending you so much of my love. I hope that you are taking the steps that you need to take to heal. I hope that maybe even this podcast was healing for you. It was healing for me to even talk about. I feel like I just sat in therapy, even though I'm talking to myself and I'm not talking to anybody else. There's no therapist on the other side of this, but it felt really good for me to talk about. And I hope that you enjoyed it. If you are listening, thank you so much for tuning in. If you are watching, thank you so much for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe, do all the things. Help your girl out. It would mean so much to me. Follow the podcast on Instagram at the B is for podcast. Make sure you follow me on Instagram. My personal Instagram is connected to the podcast Instagram. And yeah, share this with people who you think may need it. Share it with people who maybe don't know the difference between coping mechanisms and healing, and you want to go through that journey with them. Share it with people that you think could utilize some of the nuggets that I hopefully provided today. So until next time, I cannot wait to see y'all. I appreciate you for showing up for me. I appreciate you for showing up for yourself because this is an investment in you when you take time to listen to me. So thank you. And I can't wait to see you next week. Bye.